So, a very good morning to all of you. And I'm back here with operating system lecture number 14. And today we are going to see, in continuation of lecture 13, where we have seen memory management and we have seen it as just an overview. So, in today's lecture, I am going to cover up the further topics of memory management and we are going to understand some of the very crucial concepts of memory management. So, for this, let me just share the presentation with all of you so as that will make you very clear. So this is the topic for today, the main memory. So here I'm going to cover up the topics with these objectives today. The objectives of lecture 14 would be to provide a detailed description of various ways of organizing memory hardware, to discuss various memory management techniques that will include paging and segmentation. However, I'll be telling you this thing that today maybe in this particular lecture it won't be possible to cover up paging and segmentation, but in continuation to this lecture, in coming up in 15th or 16th lecture, I'm going to cover up paging and segmentation as well. So in today's lecture, maybe it is not possible to cover up the paging and segmentation part as a whole. Now, the third objective here would be to provide a detailed description of Intel Pentium, which supports both pure segmentation and segmentation with paging. Even this topic will be continued in the coming further lectures. So here, the major objective you see is, the major concept, how your operating system is managing the whole memory and why is the need of memory management occurs in the operating system. So we are going to cover up all these important topics here. So just stay tuned with me in this lecture and keep on learning. So let us first of all cover up the background. What is the background of this? See, a program must be, first of all, what do we understand in the previous lecture was that the program must be brought into the memory, and it is placed within a process for it to be done. Like I have told you in the previous lectures also that what is the need basically whenever you want to execute something, whenever a process wants to execute, it has to be loaded into the main memory from the secondary memory, which we call disk. This is the secondary memory. So what happens is, if I want to execute something, if I want to execute a piece of code, what I have to do is I have to load that piece of code, picking it up from the secondary memory and loading it on the main memory. This is the major task that I have to perform. Then main memory and registers are only storage CPU can access directly. So here, see what happens is, in the main memory there are some registers. There is a main memory and there are some registers which are small storing devices. So they are inside the main memory already. And to access those, it is only the right of CPU. Only the CPU has got the right, which can directly access these two things like main memory and the registers. Now, memory unit only sees a stream of addresses plus read request or addresses plus data and write request. So here, do understand that your memory unit can only do two things. It can see the address and it can read the request. Like if you have given a request of accessing something, if you have given writing access, requesting for a writing access, or if you are requesting for a reading access, your main memory is only able to do that, nothing more, right? Now register access in one CPU clock. So register can be accessed in a one CPU clock. CPU has a clock in which it executes its program. So the register has got only one CPU clock in which it can do the task, right? Now main memory can take many cycles, causing a stall. So here it is different from the register. See, register is taking only one CPU clock, right? But main memory can take such several cycles. It has the permission to do so, right? Then there is a memory which I told you yesterday. In yesterday's lecture, we have seen what is a cache memory. So here, cache memory sits between main memory and CPU register so as to cut short the timing of accessing and fetching the data from the secondary memory and loading it back to the main memory. So it is the cache memory which always keeps the copy of already accessed data for a particular duration, so that in near future, if you require that data again, your system doesn't have to has to find it inside the secondary memory. It can directly take up from the cache memory. So this is the role of cache memory here. Then protection of memory required to ensure correct operation. This is another important point. Now, as we are discussing the memory management, let me again tell you one important part that, see, memory management is actually the process of controlling and coordinating computer's memory, assigning several portions which are known as blocks to various running programs, so as to optimize the overall performance of the system. Now, it is the most actually important function of operating system that manages your primary memory. It has nothing to do with your secondary memory. It is only concerned about your random access memory, the main memory, right? So it helps processes to move back and fro. Back and fro means from primary to secondary, from secondary to memory, like this. The loading of data into your secondary memory, and then loading your data and transferring the data from secondary memory to primary memory. So it is the task of the memory management unit. Now it helps operating system to keep track of every memory location, irrespective of whether it is allocated to some process or it remains free. Now, important point here is that why we should use memory management, or let's say precisely that why there is a need and why the operating system should use memory management. So see, first reason for this could be it allows to check how many memory needs to be allocated to processes that decide which processor should get memory at what time. This is the primary task. Then it can track, or it tracks whenever inventory gets freed or unallocated. According to it, it will update the status. Then it allocates a space to the application routines. Whichever application routines wants to have the memory, it can give it to them also. Then it also makes sure that these applications do not interfere with each other. Every application has been given a different block of memory, just in case that they do not intervene in each other's processes or execution. Then it helps protect different processes from each other. Obviously, helps protect means that the processes do not mingle with each other so as to snatch or keep track of a shared resource. This is why they are kept aside. And then finally, the reason could be it places the program in memory so that memory is utilized to its full extent. Even that is required if your memory is always vacant. It is making, it is nothing doing, or it is not making any use. So we have to do this. Now, see, next, what would we have is, here, when we talk about the memory part, there is a pair of base and limit registers define the logical address space. So your logical, we have seen in the last lecture, there is a logical address space and there is a physical address space. So when we talk about logical address space, it consists of a base and a limit register, right? Now, there is a base register and there is a limit register. Here you can see in this diagram, let's say this is an operating system and this is a complete stack. The processes are stored in the stack and this is the address which is given. So let's say I'm talking about this second process, particularly this second process. So here, what is the base? Base means from which point it is starting. It is starting from this 30040, right? And what is the limit of this process? What is the limit means? What is the capacity? What is the size of this process? So the size is, it is the limit of 120900. How would you calculate? Now just add this limit into this base register. There is address of base register which is 30040. If you add this base register to this limit, you will get this value. Just quickly do it. Just quickly try to add it up and just see if you get this value 420940. You'll get the same value, right? So this is showing, the base register shows that at what address your process has been allocated and at what point, at what address it is getting finished up, right? So it will always tell you that how many blocks of memory is assigned to you. This is the point. So I hope this one is clear to you. Now here, see what is happening. As I told you that, your hardware, your operating system actually need physical address. It cannot, use logical address, and on the basis of that, it can load it into the uh, random access memory. So what happens is CPU generates an address that is logical address, and that address is checked that, is it whether it is greater than, here what do we do, the address is there and then we add the base here. If it is greater than the address, then what will happen, we'll move it further and we'll just add base plus limit. If it is less, then we allow the memory to be here. But if it is more, what do? We just trap to the operating system monitor and we just call it as a trap. So you see, if if let's say the capacity or the address that I'm going to store in is 400, and let's say by adding this base to the address it comes out to be 500. So in that case, 500 is not your memory address. That means the operating system thinks that you are trying to, intervene in some other's address space. That is why it considers as this as a unauthorized access and consider it as a trap. That is why it quickly traps the address and don't allow it to move forward. So clear cut, in nutshell, what we can say is the address that is generated by the CPU is commonly referred to as the logical address. It is basically a virtual address. It is not the real one, it is just a virtual address. And the logical address is basically the address of an instruction or a data which is used by any program. So the set of all logical addresses that are generated by any program, it is referred to as logical address space. So what is logical address space? It is nothing but the set of all the logical addresses that are generated by any program. Okay. Now, the address that is loaded into the memory address register of the memory is commonly referred to as physical address. Do remember, what is physical address? That address which is loaded into the memory address register of the memory, right? Of the random access memory. It is physical address. And importantly, the physical address, the physical address cannot be accessed by the user directly. The user cannot use it directly, but the user, he or she can calculate the physical address with the help of logical address, right? Now, the user's program mainly generates the logical address, and the user thinks that the program is running in this logical address. But what happens is the program mainly needs physical memory in order to complete its execution. So here, as we have seen logical address space, there is a physical address space as well. So the set of all the physical addresses which are corresponding to logical address is commonly known as physical address space, right? Now, as I told you, and I'm several times using a word which is called MMU, the Memory Management Unit is in OS. What exactly is this Memory Management Unit? Now understand, it is basically a hardware device that does the runtime mapping from the virtual address to the physical address. See, recently I've told you what is logical address space and what is physical address space. So as I told you that for a program to be executed, we should have its physical address. And importantly, as I told you, the user doesn't have a direct access to the physical address. We need to calculate it from the help of logical address. So who does this task of converting and transforming this logical address into the physical address? Now this is the task of memory management unit. So here this MMU or the memory management unit has got the task of mapping your virtual address, which are logical address, to the physical address. And specifically this MMU is located within the central processing unit. So MMU always resides in the central processing unit. Now, as I told you, the base register is also called here in this diagram. You can see, let me show you this. The diagram you can see the base register we are talking about. Okay. Now, this base register is also called the relocation register, which I have, explained in lecture number 13 as well. So the relocation register is actually a special register in the CPU, which is used for the mapping of logical addresses used by a program to physical addresses of the system's main memory. Now, the value of the relocation register is added to every address that is generated by the user process at the time when the address is sent to the memory, right? And if you remember, we have taken one example where we have supposed that the base is 14,000. The base is 14,000. Then an attempt by the user to address location 0, let's say the address location is 0, is relocated dynamically to 14,000. Thus, access to location 356, let's say if it wants to access the location 356, then what does it has to do? It has to map it with 14,000 and the result would be 14,356. Now see, it is important to note that the user program never sees the real physical address. The program can create a pointer to location 356 and it can store it in the memory and then manipulate it after that, right? And it can compare it with 356 then. The user program always deals with the logical address. The MMU mainly converts the logical address into the physical address. This is the main task, right? And the final location of the reference memory address is not determined until the reference is made. So you don't know this thing, right? Now, there are two types of addresses that we have. As I have told you that there are logical addresses which lies in the range of 0 to max, and similarly we have physical addresses which lies in the range of r plus 0 to r plus max for the base value r. R is what? R is the value for the relocation register or the base value, right? Now, as we have told above in the previous concepts, we have been told to that the user generates only a logical address and then thinks that the process runs in location 0 to max. However, these logical addresses must be mapped to physical addresses before they can be used. Okay. Now, exactly what is the difference between logical address and physical address? Quickly just cover it up. The different we are going to differentiate between the two so that it will be very clear to all of you. So when we talk about logical address, users can access the logical address of the program, but the physical addresses cannot be directly accessed by the user. This is the primary difference between the two. Then the logical address is generated by the CPU. Understand this thing, that CPU is the one which is generating your logical address, right? But the physical address is located in the memory unit itself. It is not generated, it is already there in your memory unit. Then the third difference is that user can access the physical address with the help of logical address. If a user knows what is the logical address of its piece of code, then with the help of this logical address, he can generate the physical address. But a physical address can be accessed by the user indirectly, but not directly. So here there is no point that you can go back from physical address to logical address. But from logical address, if you have it, you can just go to the physical address. You can calculate it basically, right? Now the fourth point says that the logical address does not exist physically. Physically, it is not there. That is why we are calling it as a virtual address. But on the other hand, the physical address is a location in the memory which is present, physically. It is not a virtual part, it is physically present. Then a set of all logical addresses, that are generated by any program, we call them logical address space. And here, the set of all physical addresses corresponding to logical address is commonly called the physical address space. And as I told you, here, the address are generated by CPU. And here, if we talk about in this your physical address space, it is computed by your memory management unit. So I think by now this one has been very clear to you that how we are going to do the things, right? Now we'll understand what is address binding. That is a very important concept here. Now see, the programs that are there in your secondary storage, that means which are existing on your disk, they are ready to be brought into the memory to execute, from an input queue. As I have told you, why input queue? See, in operating system, we have seen process management where I've told you that when a process is ready to execute, it is always sent into a waiting queue, an input queue, right? So this is the same thing we are referring to here, that when I want to execute my program, I need to load it from the secondary memory to the main memory. And how do we do that? We need to store our program inside the waiting queue, where from the queue your CPU one by one it will take process, one by one it will take from the queue, and it will load into the main memory to get executed, right? Now, without support, it must be loaded into the address 0000. Now, it is very inconvenient to have first user process physical address always at at 0000. How can it not be? Now, further, address represented in different ways at different stages of a program's life. Like source code addresses are usually symbolic in nature. They use mnemonics. And if we talk about compiled code addresses, they bind it to the relocatable addresses. That is 14 bytes from beginning of this module. As similarly, linker or loader will bind relocatable address to absolute address, and each binding maps one address space to another. So this one is an important point. So what are the binding of instructions and data to memory? Now see, address binding of instructions and data to memory addresses can happen at three different stages. So this binding occurs at what time? We need to understand this. So it occurs at three different stages. One is at the compile time, another is at the loading time, and third one is exactly at the execution time. So at compile time, if memory location is known in advance, absolute code can be generated there, and it must recompile the code if the starting location changes. Then the second time you are binding the address is at the loading time, where we must generate relocatable code if memory location is not known at the compile time. And thirdly, we can use it at the execution time, where binding is delayed until runtime. If the process can be moved during its execution from one memory segment to another. For this, it needs hardware support for address maps. So, if I just conclude this particular topic of address binding, what I can say here is that, see, we have already seen this point particularly of address binding. We have seen this thing, right? Now, basically, if I say in nutshell or in a conclusion part, I can say that it is just the process of mapping from one address space to another address space, like from logical address space to physical address space. Now, logical address is an address which is generated by CPU during execution, whereas physical address refers to the location in the memory unit, the one that is loaded into the memory. So the logical address undergoes translation by the memory management unit or address translation unit in particular. And the output of this process is the appropriate physical address or the location of code or data in the random access memory. So as I have told you that these are the three things, three times at which the address binding happens. So address binding happens when, if you know that at compile time. So if you know that that during compile time, where process will reside in the memory, then an absolute address is generated. That is, the physical address is embedded to the executable of the program during compilation. Now, loading the executable as a process in memory is very fast. But if the generated address space is preoccupied by the other processes, then the program, it crashes and it becomes necessary to recompile the program to change the address space. So this is one time, this is the compile time at which the address binding can happen. Then the second time I have told you that it is the load time. So if it is not known at the compile time where the process will reside, then a relocatable address will be generated. Now the loader translates this relocatable address to an absolute address. The base address of the process in main memory is added to all logical addresses by the loader to generate an absolute address. Now in this, if the base address of the process changes, then we need to reload the process again. Now the third time I've told you is the execution time, and the instructions are in memory and are being processed by the CPU. Additional memory may be allocated or deallocated at this time. So this is used if a process can be moved from one memory to another during execution, which is called dynamic linking. Linking that is done during load or runtime. For example, it could be compaction. Okay. Now this is the multi-step processing of the user program. Here you can see. So here, as you can see in this diagram, what we are doing is we are giving the source program. Source program is then compiled or assembled, which will produce an object module. Now, after producing this object modules, there is a linkage editor which links the other object modules. There could be other object modules as well. So it is the task of your linkage editor to link all the other modules, and then it produces a load module. Now, this load module is given as an input to the loader, where loader does what? It adds up the definitions from the system library as well. So these three parts, the linking, the creation of the load module, and then providing it as an input to the loader is actually the load time which happens. So, the binding can occur at load time. It can occur at the compile time that you are seeing here in this diagram, and finally, the loader gives the output, which is in memory binary memory image, right? So this is the execution time where the dynamic linking can happen. So these is where you can do so. So now this PPT is already showing the differentiations that we have already seen with logical and physical address space. We have seen this thing already, and we have seen this memory management unit as well, where MMU is considered to be a hardware device that at runtime maps virtual to physical address. Virtual means the logical address. Now, there are many methods which are possible. To start with, consider simple scheme where the value in the location relocation register is added to every address generated by a user process at the time it is sent to the memory. So the base register is here called the relocation register. Now, important thing is if we talk about the DOS operating system, MS-DOS on Intel 8086 processor, it uses four relocation register, right? Now the user program deals with logical addresses, and I told you that we are not able to see the physical address. And execution time binding occurs when reference is made to the location in the memory, and logical address is bound to the physical addresses. Now, what exactly is dynamic linking? See, static linking is system libraries and program codes combined by the loader into the binary program image is called static linking. Now, when we talk about dynamic linking, it is the linking postponed until till execution time. So, dynamic linking occurs at the time of execution. Now, it is a small piece of code which you can call stub, which is used to locate the appropriate memory resident library routine. So, stub, what does it do? It replaces itself with the address of the routine and executes the routine. So operating system, it checks if the routine is in process or it is processing memory addresses. If not in the address space, it has to be added to the address space. So, dynamic linking is particularly useful for the libraries and, for some kind of systems which are called shared libraries. So consider applicability to patching system libraries where versioning may be needed at times. Now we have come to an important topic which is called swapping. So let us understand the concept of swapping in operating system. See, swapping is a memory management technique, and it is used to temporarily remove the inactive programs from the main memory of the computer system. Now, any process must be in the memory for its execution. We have seen this thing, but it can be swapped temporarily out of the memory to a backing store, and then again brought back into the memory to complete its execution. So swapping is done so that other processes get memory for their execution. Now, see, due to swapping technique, performance usually gets affected. The performance of the CPU gets affected if you apply swapping, every now and then. But at times, it is also, helping in running your multiple and big processes in parallel. So the swapping process is also known as a technique for memory compaction. Do you understand what is memory compaction? It is just the swapping process. So basically, low priority processes may be swapped out so that the processes with a higher priority may be loaded and executed. If you remember, in the topic of process management, I have told you this thing that there are sometimes interrupts which are generated when a low priority task is executing. And let us assume that if a high priority task comes in, then that low priority task has to be interrupted and it has to be loaded back to the secondary memory. So this loading back of a low priority task from the main memory to the secondary memory or the disk is done by the swapping process, and this particular process is called swapping here, right? So the swapping is done at this particular moment. Now, uh, as I told you that process can be swapped temporarily out of the memory to a backing store, and then it can be brought back for the continued execution. So the total memory space of a process can exceed a physical memory. Now there's a backing store where fast disk large enough to accommodate copies of all the memory images for all user, and it must provide direct access to the memory images. See, what happens is, the if we talk about the main memory, in the main memory there is some user space already allocated for the user purpose, and the operating system is also residing in your main memory, right? Now let us assume that there is a backing store which consists of so many processes. There is a backing store in which we do all these things. So let us assume that there is a multi-programming environment with a round robin scheduling algorithm. Whenever the time quantum expires, then the memory manager starts to swap out those processes that are just finished and swap other another processes into the memory that has been freed. And in the meantime, the CPU scheduler allocates that time slices to some other processes in the memory, right? Now, the swapping of processes by the memory manager is fast enough that some processes will be in memory ready to execute, and when the CPU scheduler wants to reschedule the CPU. So, a variant of swapping technique is the priority based scheduling algorithm. If any high priority process arrives and wants service, then the memory manager swaps out lower priority processes and then load the higher priority processes and executes them. So when the process with higher priority finishes, uh, you know, then the process with lower priority is swapped back in and continues its execution. So this variant is sometimes, it is known as roll in and roll out. Now there are two more concepts that come in the swapping technique, and these are swap in and swap out. So what are these two techniques? Understand? See, the procedure by which any process gets removed from the hard disk and placed in the main memory is called the swap-in. Swap-in means you are, fetching the data from the secondary memory, from the disk, and you are loading it in the RAM. This is called swap-in. On the other hand, if you are removing the process from the main memory after execution, or let's say on the interrupt generation, if you are removing it from the main memory and you are loading it back into the hard disk, then we call it as a swap out procedure. So this is what we call is swap out and swap in. Now, what all are the advantages of swapping? As we have seen, one disadvantage that it reflects is it decreases the efficiency of your computer system, but still it has got some advantages. What are the advantages? See, this mainly helps the CPU to manage multiple processes within a single main memory, because parallelly so many processes are running. So to execute them all on very time, on their actual time, is done by this swapping process. It is the one which is managing all these things to complete the execution of a process on time. Now, secondly, this technique also helps to create and use the virtual memory process. Now, with the help of this technique, the CPU can, perform several tasks simultaneously. Thus, the process need not wait too long for their execution. And basically, this technique proves to be economical also. It is not very expensive one. So this technique can be, easily applied to priority based scheduling in order to improve its performance. Wherever the priority task comes in, it is the one which can, preempt a low priority process, and it can bring back the high priority process. Now, what is the disadvantage of swapping here? See, there may occur inefficiency in the case if a resource or a variable is commonly used by those processes that are participating in the swapping process. This is the one disadvantage. Second could be, see, if the algorithm used for swapping is not good, then the overall method can increase the number of page faults and thus decline the overall performance of the processing. Now, what is page fault? We are going to cover it in the coming lectures. Okay. Now, third advantage would be if the computer system loses power at the time of high swapping activity, then the user might lose all the information related to the program. So this is a very major disadvantage of swapping. So this is what swapping is all about. So I think the swapping part is already clear to all of you. You can see here the schematic view of swapping here. See, this is your main memory. You can see the main memory here, wherein for a little portion operating system is residing in your main memory, and the rest part is for the user space. Now, what is happening? Swapping out means that we are moving a piece of code from the main memory to the secondary memory. That is swap out. And swap in means that we are taking or we are fetching a process from the secondary memory to the main memory, to the user space of the main memory. So this is called swapping. So this is the schematic diagram which is showing how the swapping works out. What is context switch time including swapping? See, if next process is to be put on CPU is not in the memory, it needs to be swap out a process and swap in the target process. Context switch time can then be very high. This is called context switching, right? Now 100 MB process swapping to hard disk with transfer rate of 50 MB per second, where the swap out time will be 2000 microseconds, and plus the swap in of the same sized process. So the total context switch swapping component time becomes 4000, 2000 plus 2000, 4 seconds. Now this can reduce, if the reduced size of the memory is swapped by knowing how much memory we really, it is really being used. Now, other constraints can be there on the swapping as well, like pending input output. So, if there is a something, if a process is waiting for some kind of input output, if it is running pending, then it cannot be swapped out, and input output would occur to wrong process. Let's say uh, I have my process is running inside the main memory, and let's say if it requires some kind of input and output resource. So, at a particular moment, if you let's say if you are swapping it out, you are making or moving it from the main memory to the secondary memory, and you are bringing another target process inside the memory to just to execute. So it can happen that by the time the second process is loaded into the main memory, the input output request that was granted by the previous process can be given to this process. So it will be a wrong mapping. So this can also occur while you are doing context switching. So, it is always transferred into the kernel space, then the input output device do this thing. So, it is known as double buffering, which actually adds overhead to your system. So, standard swapping is not used in modern operating system, but its modified version can be used where you have to swap only when free memory is extremely low. In that case, only swapping is happening. What is swapping on mobile systems? Basically, it is not supported. It is flash-based, memory-based system where a small amount of space is there, and there are limited number of writing cycles, and there is a poor throughput between flash memory and CPU on the mobile platform. Instead of this, it uses other methods to free the memory, like iOS asks apps to voluntarily relinquish allocated memory. There could be read-only data thrown out and reloaded from the flash if needed. And there could be failure to free can result in termination as well. Sometimes you are running an app and suddenly it just terminate. Why? Because of the problem of low memory. It can happen. Now, in Android systems, what happen is it terminate apps if no free memory is there, but first writes application state to flash for the fast restart. So both the OSs, whether you're talking about iOS or you're talking about Android, they both support paging, right? Now, what is a paging concept? We are coming up with these things, and in the next lecture, I am going to cover up the storage allocation techniques as well. There are various storage allocation techniques. There are index one, there are sequential one. So we are coming up with more of them. So stay tuned with me with the coming lectures, because I'm going to cover up other more crucial concepts of these memory management. So I hope in today's lecture you have enjoyed and you have learned a lot of things about memory management unit and how the memory is managed. We have seen binding process, we have seen swapping process, we have seen the logical address space and the physical address space. So I hope all these things will be clear to you. So now I'm going to quickly share the MCQs with all of you. I hope due to this learning you will be able to answer all these questions correctly. So let me just quickly share with all of you the MCQs for today. So these are the questions that you can go through. Question number 1, 2, and 3. CPU fetches the instructions from memory according to the value of. I've seen this thing. Then second question says a memory buffer used to accommodate a speed differential is called stack pointer, cache, accumulator, or disk buffer. And the third question says which one of the following is the address which is generated by the CPU? Is it the physical address, the absolute address, the logical address, or none of the above mentioned? Now let me take you to the next set of questions, question number 4, 5, and 6. Now the fourth question says runtime mapping from virtual to physical address is done by the memory management unit, the CPU, the PCI, or none of the above. This is question number 4. Then we have question number 5 where it is said that memory management technique in which the system restores and retrieves data from secondary storage for use in main memory. It is called. Is it called fragmentation, a paging, a mapping, or none of the above mentioned? Then there is sixth question which says the address of a page table in the memory is pointed by the stack pointer, the page table based register, the page register, or the program counter. And let me take you to the next set of questions. Program always deals with the logical address, absolute address, physical address, or relative address. So let us take the answer. Finally, question number 8 says the page table contains. Is it the base address of each page in physical memory? Is it the page offset, the page size, or none of the above? Question number 9 is compaction, which is a technique for overcoming internal fragmentation, a paging technique, a technique for overcoming external fragmentation, or a technique for overcoming a fatal error. So I hope you'll be able to answer this question as well. And finally, we come over to the last question, that is question number 10. Operating system maintains the page table for every process, for every thread, for every instruction, or for every address. So I think this would be always, it is already clear to you. We have seen this concept in the previous lecture and in this lecture as well. So I hope you all will be able to answer these questions correctly, as we have, had already 2 lectures on this memory management topic. So for now, I think that all the topics are very clear to you. So here I'm just ending up this lecture with this note of swapping, and in the coming lectures we'll further continue with these topics related to paging, segmentation, and the storage allocation technique. So stay tuned with me and keep on learning. Thank you so much.